Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here, going to be continuing with the course on poetry. Now, I think when we left off, we had just put some good poems on the table, and now we're going to talk about the nature of poetry, sort of. So let's just dive in here. And what if the first assertion that I made was that E. E. Cummings has no value as a poet? So assuming I said that E. E. Cummings is not a valuable poet, and assuming that I wasn't hung from the nearest street lamp on a meat hook, I would then add, of course, that John Donne was an extremely valuable poet. Kipling was a good poet. Burton Braley was a good poet. But E. E. Cummings was not. Now this evaluation goes against every basic assumption of the modern art idea, the postmodern idea of abstract art and things being an emotional interpretation. You know, the paintings that are just all splitter, splatter, and hogwash. That's what E. E. Cummings poetry is. And for me to go and say E. E. Cummings is not valuable goes against that whole modern idea that art is sacred and that nobody can judge art. It's sacred and invaluable, and you can't criticize it. It is sacred. There's no other word that captures what they think of art. It's blasphemy, literally blasphemy, to say anything bad about someone's painting or poem or whatever. Blasphemy. I mean, they hold it sacred. So how can I so arrogantly elect myself as the final judge and pronounce who is and who isn't a proper poet and so forth? And I believe I'm totally justified in that. So let's go down and see the reasons. Now, first of all, let's talk about poetry's musical nature. If you're wondering how to classify poetry in the grand scheme of things, it is writing plus music. It is some qualities of prose and some qualities of music put together. That's poetry. Now, if you subtract either one of those, you are gone. It's not a poem anymore. Now, it's my contention, and it's a point that I'll be continually stressing, is that the essential characteristic of poetry, the thing that differentiates it from all other forms of written communication, is the quality of music, including rhythm, rhyme, and meter. So it's similar to prose in that it uses concepts. It's similar to drama and play and so forth in that it uses concepts and words and whichever. But rhyme, rhythm, meter, beat, those things are poetic. Now you can have blank verse where there's no rhyme to it, but it's got meter, it's got some sort of rhythm, it's measured. You can have that sort of thing. But what I'm saying is that poetry necessitates some or all of those, at least some of those. You have to have rhyme, rhythm, or meter in some way, somewhere in a poem, or it's not a poem. So the question comes up, can't we just say, here's a set of powerful, memorable lines, and we're just going to call it a poem? Why can't we call that a poem if it's just powerful, memorable lines, and they're said in maybe what we might call poetic fashion, but they don't rhyme or rhythm, have meter, beat, nothing like that? And to this I have to say that I myself have written poems that didn't rhyme. It just comes out. You have the poetic feelings and you jot down the lines. They didn't have rhyme or rhythm or meter. But I regard those as unfinished poems. Those are not finished. Those are raw material to be worked with. You can forge them into a poem, but they're just rough material at that point. So I regard that as the starting point for a poet. The poet first gets out the stuff on the page that he wants to say, and then he makes it beautiful. And we're going to look a little bit at that in just a second here, so hold on to your pants. Sometimes I get a line or a set of lines or a phrase, just jotting things down, just putting it out there, that it's a line or a phrase that's so powerful that I can't see a way to improve it. I can't see what to change about it. Maybe it's the language or the cadence that grabs my attention, or maybe some elusive quality, the quality of some word, some particular word that I like in there, accountable only to my own tastes. Whatever it is, the lines, sometimes they just don't want to lend themselves to recasting. You can't recast a really excellent line, whether it rhymes or not. Now when this happens, when I've got a non-rhyming poem that I cannot rebuild, I can't do anything with it, because it's just perfect the way it is, but it doesn't rhyme or have rhythm or meter or beat or anything. It's just the notes. When I come up against that, I set that poem aside, because it is potential. It has not become a poem yet. It is the material for a poem. It is potential, so I set it aside and I let it rest, sometimes for months, even a couple of years. Some of my poems have sat, and I go back to them finally and I'm able to rework them and make a real poem. So I regard such poems as the beginning notes. Just basically you're jotting down notes, you're brainstorming. And no matter how good the language is, your job as a poet is to try to preserve the beauty and the health and the vigor of your language once you've made it rhyme and have rhythm and meter and whichever. So I'm going to read now an example of a poem that I wrote, and I liked this poem and I was unable to alter it because it expressed so fully my feelings, and it's titled A Human Romance. Now I'm going to be doing a couple of romance poems, and I apologize for the romantic content, but I think it's a theme that almost anyone can relate to. Whatever experiences you've had with any other thing, almost everyone's had some experience with love and with pain. So I got a couple of poems, and I'm going to go ahead and do one of them now called A Human Romance. And you're going to notice there's no rhyme, rhythm, meter, or beat here, or very, very little. She was with me, but not mine. Her eyes were sleepy with beauty. I had her. I did not own her. I was a captive of my captive, and she felt she was too. The skin on her body reminds me of milk, while her delicate voice recalls for me silk. Her beautiful eyes burn a hole in my soul. Why did I have her? I still do not know. I woke on a morning when she was with me. I sat up to ponder her morning physique. No makeup and puffy eyes, a red crease on her cheek. But her beauty transcended my scrutiny. I saw only perfection in her visage. The end. Now, I loved that one line up there, captive of my captive. I was a captive of my captive, and she felt she was too. We were captivated by each other. I loved that part where she was sleepy with beauty. In fact, I saw a documentary one time, and it said the reason that we like women's eyebrows to kind of come down at the edge, they go up and downwards, is because when humans have orgasms, these muscles at the corners of their eyes relax and droop inwards. And so women who have that natural look kind of look like they're on the edge of orgasm all the time. I don't know if that's, it sounds fairly reasonable to me, but it also sounds a little Freudian. But anyways, so when your eyes are a little puffy, they have sort of that look. It's a good line, I thought. I can't justify it any further than that. Now these lines expressed my feelings about this subject really, really well, so perfectly, in fact, that I had to leave them unaltered. 3 years later, not quite 3 years, I came back to this poem. And one day I was reading it, and I decided it was just too good to leave it unfinished. It had so much good raw material in there. So I sat down and I started to try to get more rhyme in it. So here's my revised version. I had her, I did not own her, but this did not make me blue. I was a captive of my captive, and she felt she was too. She was with me, but not mine. Sleepy with beauty, she was supine. Her skin's complexion reminds me of milk, while her delicate voice recalls for me silk. Her beautiful eyes burn a hole in my soul. Why did I have her? I still do not know. I woke on a morning when she was with me, and I sat up to ponder her morning physique. No makeup, puffy eyes, creases on her cheek, but her beauty transcended my scrutiny, and I saw only perfection in her visage. The end.